you, Madam Toastmaster. Welcome, visitors and guests. You've experienced so many calamities in your life. You've witnessed them on television. Earthquakes, hurricanes, tornadoes, nuclear leaks, oil spills, violence in movie theaters, stock market crashes. But are you prepared for the next calamity that's coming your way? The one that you never anticipated? Well, I'm here today to give you 3 valuable tools that will help you get through any calamity, whether big or small. First, I'm going to walk you through these 3 tools and give you some examples of how they can work in your life. And then I'm going to explain in detail what the tools are. And lastly, I'm going to give you some other resources that you can take home with you so that you can add a lot of tools to your toolbox. I'd like you to imagine that you have an imaginary toolbox. And on the cover are written in the big red letters, Dauntless Courage. It all begins with the first tool. Let me give you a story. But before I tell you this story, I want to tell you this. If you don't use these tools, the next time a calamity comes into your life, you will feel helpless, unprepared, and unable to deal with it. But if you do use these tools, these 3 tools I'm going to go over with you today, you will be able to tap into an enormous inner strength. You will be able to know exactly what to do. You will be able to remain calm, and you will be able to be helpful to others. So it all begins with the first tool. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, I decided to go on a hiking trip in Utah. And the name of the place was called the Devil's Cauldron. You can't go hiking alone in the Devil's Cauldron because the walls form intricate mazes and you could get lost. We had a guide with us. His name was Major Dan. Major Dan wore a green uniform and a ranger hat, and he gave us a fascinating lecture as we were walking through the desert. And the next thing I knew, we were thousands of feet high in elevation. And there was a sheer drop below us. Have you ever been at a really, really high elevation and looked below to try and find your car? Well, I was trying to find my SUV, and it was the size of a little insect. And Major Dan said to everyone, "Stay calm and find your perfect balance." Stay calm and find your perfect balance, which brings us to tool number 1. Find your perfect balance. We started to meander down into some canyons that were carved and molded by the winds and water of time. They were orange and white candy cane colored, and it smelled like a rich and earthy scent. We came to a step, and I couldn't get up it, and I lost my balance. There was a man behind me. He was Cuban, about 45 years old, and he said, "Let me help you, I can push you." And a woman in front of me, blonde, grabbed my arms and whoop, up I went. And Major Dan came over to us and said, "Connie, help is always available to you when you're open to it. Remember that." Which brings us to the second tool in our toolbox. Help is always available to you when you're open to it. We started to walk further down the path. Major Dan told everybody to stop. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting to a point in the path where it's going to turn to water. You're going to have to scramble for about 25 feet. You put 2 hands on the front wall, you put 2 feet on the back wall, and get yourself at a 90-degree angle. And then you scramble across the path." And I said, Major Dan, I don't know how to scramble. That's a technique for experts. I'm just a beginner. I don't know how to scramble. Have you ever been asked to do something that you didn't think you were capable of doing? And if you didn't do it, you have no other option because you can't do anything else? Well, I was very nervous. So I went to the back of the line. And Major Dan said, "Connie, just tell yourself you can do it. Just tell yourself you can do it." Which brings us to the third tool in our toolbox. Tell yourself you can do it. I started to watch and I saw little children were doing it. They were scrambling and their grandmothers were doing it. And then it became my turn. And when I felt the wall, it felt like sandpaper. And when I put my foot on the wall, it stuck like a suction cup. I couldn't believe it. There was no way I could fall. So I started to scramble. First 2 feet, then 3 feet. And then I heard a choir of beautiful cicadas. Have you ever heard cicadas singing in the trees in the summertime in the parks here? Chattering away. And I looked down and there were 2 black, beady eyes staring at me. Have you ever encountered a wild animal in nature and had no idea what its intentions were? I heard Major Dan call out, "Connie, you can do it. Just keep moving. It's just a snake. She's trying to protect her babies. Just keep moving and she won't hurt you." So I kept moving. I told myself, you can do it. You can do it. And finally, I arrived at the end of the path to a thunderous round of applause. Have you ever done something that you didn't think you were capable of doing, and then you found out that you had some kind of potential that you didn't even know you had? I felt victorious. Felt wonderful. So, in conclusion, it's a great idea to anticipate and prepare yourself for a challenge or a calamity. Now, I've given you 3 tools that you can use. However, if you would like more tools, I would like to pass around a clipboard. If you'd like to put your name on the clipboard, I will send you an article that will give you 25 additional tools that you can put in your toolbox. Now, if you don't use these tools that I've gone over with you today, the next time a calamity or an emergency or a challenge comes your way, you won't be prepared. You won't have the tools. You won't know what to do, and you certainly won't be useful to other people. But if you do use these tools, you will tap into an inner strength that you never knew you had. You will tap into a courage that you didn't know was there. And you will be strong and confident and able to get through it. The 3 tools are: 1, find your perfect balance. Number 2, help is always available when you're open to it. Tool number 3, tell yourself you can do it. And if you want additional tools, sign up for my email list and I will send you a list of 25 additional tools. Now I'm going to leave you with one final thought that's more important than anything I've told you today. It's a new battle cry. Dauntless courage is yours. Dauntless courage forever.
Connie, I really liked this speech. I think you did a lot of incorporations. I thought that particularly your working with words were incredibly descriptive. You had a lot of phrases that I truly loved. The rich and earthy scent, the cicadas singing and chattering, even though I hate them and find them creepy, but beautiful, beautiful imagery. Also, you described the people, so I had a sense of that. You described the textures. It really had all the senses involved. I thought that was absolutely great. Also loved the imaginary toolbox, and I had a good idea of that in my head. I think, too, that you have incorporated a lot of Tim's suggestions on the using of the you with the audience. Some of the things that I would suggest, you said, what's the one thing that you never anticipated? Blah, 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 blah. Pause, let people actually think, what did I never anticipate? And you also were very cruel to me in particular, because as soon as somebody says, I'll tell you a story, I am waiting for the story, and apparently you wanted to tell us something else first, so you kind of backed up, which was a little bit of a tease for me. One of the tools you suggested was find your perfect balance. I really did not understand what that meant. Did you mean physical balance? I would have liked a little more description on that. Also, you talked a lot about the black eyes. You talked a lot about the cicadas, and then you said you saw two little black eyes peering at you. I thought, oh, they must be cicadas, but no, it was a snake, so you kind of misled me there.
Connie, great vocal variety. I love the victorious part. And what great energy you gave. You wanted to give us an uplifting message, the tools that we can take back and use on our own. I enjoyed the stories that you weaved through your speech that gives us a sense of how the tools can be used, and you did a great job describing them and giving very vivid images. Because this is a longer speech, I would have liked you to show us, maybe with a visual aid, a list of the tools. It's a longer speech and it's toward the end of the day, and a visual aid with a list of the tools would have deepened the impression, in my opinion. I also like to see a little bit more body movement. You did a great job with gesture. How about move around a little bit? Pop out the image, pop out the message. But all in all, I thought you did a great job, and I'm going to try to use the 3 tools that you gave us today. Thank you.
Wonderful things there. The tease was great, the push-pull, say what they aren't going to get and then say what they are going to get if they do pay attention. Story, foundational phrase, gestures go very well with the story. Stepping out of the story, connecting with the audience, asking for the sale at the very end, handing around the thing when people are interested and engaged, relevant, yet a final thought. Could be a little bit better. I'll come back to that in just a little bit. You say, for thoughts about growth, I'd like to imagine. Instead of saying I'd like you to imagine, just say imagine. Without all that other stuff, just say it. Eye contact is a little bit dodgy. So very few people, so you can really deep eye contact. Dialogue, I would have liked more dialogue at the beginning with the ranger, for the very first one. The second one is good, and the third one is good, but more at the beginning. You have sort of a fake voice for the ranger, and I really suggest using a natural voice. It's okay. You're a woman speaking for a ranger, but we can imagine that in our mind. If you use a fake voice, it kind of takes us out of the moment. We pay more attention to your voice than actually the story. You're the place where you're pointed. Use your open hands. Some people get a strong reaction to pointing. Recap the tools at the very end. Here are the tools. This tool, and that tool, and that tool. Some people will only listen to the end of your speech, so recap the tools at the end. And finally, the final word's a little bit too long. Dauntless, that sort of thing. Maybe go for it, or something victorious, a great one. So be victorious, or something like that, that really will stick in people's mind. Final thought, you want to be short, to the point, and memorable.
Well, Connie, thank you very much for that speech. I think courage is a perennial subject, and one which we got some insight into your personal character and experiences on tonight. I want to say a couple great things about the speech, a few things I thought were mixed, and then a few things that I think could be worked on. This was a keynote address, and I think that overall your approach to a keynote subject was sound. I think it was applicable to the audience, and I think that it was structured in close enough to a formal structure that it could fit and be developed into a keynote. I agreed that your vocal variety was great. I think you started the speech off with a very professional body language and professional posture. Could have seen you move more, and would have liked to see a little more vocal tonality up front. I think you were finding your sea legs a little bit maybe, because I noticed the tonality and your eye contact improved throughout your speech. I really noticed a marked improvement on that. With the structure of the speech itself, I had a criticism regarding the relevance of your introduction and the supporting information. In your introduction, you gave what I might consider could border on platitudes about kind of like everybody knows, or there are all these times when people need courage. And among those, you listed a few that were general and generic, like there are earthquakes and natural disasters, and then a few that were specific, like the specific shooting recently, and even relatively specifically the financial crisis. I think that then you tried to bridge that into what was entirely a personal story about things that took personal courage but actually weren't, in the grand scheme of the universe, a calamity. There was kind of some humor in there, and I did not feel like those two were reconciling and really building the base to a call for action. And I struggled with this. It seems like you might struggle with this to really take yourself seriously enough to say, I have something to say about courage. So to say that in a different way, on the one hand, you're setting courage up with a very lofty introduction, and then you had kind of a humorous take on it. I'd like to see those match more. If it's going to be a personal story, maybe introduce it as a personal story. I think that your storytelling was strong. I agree with what the other reviewers said there, and I think that framing it as a story and a personal triumph would be overall a more successful way to approach the subject matter, and that I think people would be more interested in accepting your offer if it was personal.